The second my divorce was finalized, Clara pushed a bank card across the table toward me. "Child support," she said, her tone as matter-of-fact as if she were talking about the weather. "I'll have it transferred to your account each month." I didn't bother to look up at her. With a simple flick of my finger, I sent the card sliding back across the polished wood, where it came to a stop against the cuff of her expensive silk blouse. "That won't be necessary," I replied. "I'm leaving this marriage with nothing. I'll be responsible for all of our child's expenses on my own." The room fell silent. For the first time, Clara's perpetually calm expression broke, her eyes widening in genuine shock. I suppose she had expected me to plead with her, to try and negotiate a better settlement for our son. I had, after all, been a stay-at-home father for the past 7 years, entirely dependent on her income. I was disconnected from the professional world and had no savings to speak of. To walk away with absolutely nothing was, by any logical measure, a decision bordering on self-destruction. Even the government employee who was finalizing our paperwork couldn't help but shoot a confused glance in my direction, likely wondering if I had completely lost my senses. Clara's brow furrowed in a flicker of irritation. "Leo, don't be so stubborn. You have the child and no job. How are you possibly going to provide for him?" "That's my concern, not yours," I said, standing from my chair. I carefully folded my copy of the divorce agreement and placed it inside the old, worn canvas bag I carried. "Clara, as of this moment, we have nothing more to do with each other." I took our son Sam's small hand into mine, straightened my shoulders, and walked out of the civil affairs office without looking back. The afternoon sun felt unusually bright. As we walked away, I could feel her gaze on my back, a heavy mixture of confusion and intense scrutiny. My best friend Mark was waiting to pick me up, and he started in on me the moment I got in the car. "Leo, are you out of your mind? You walked away without taking a single thing? What are you, some kind of martyr? Clara was the one who had the affair. She's the one who's at fault here. Why wouldn't you take her money? Sam's school, his doctor's visits, everything costs money. What are you planning to raise him on? Air?" Thankfully, Sam was in his car seat in the back, completely absorbed with his toys, so he didn't hear Mark's frustrated lecture. I leaned my head back against the passenger seat and closed my eyes, feeling a deep sense of exhaustion wash over me. Every word Mark spoke felt like a tiny, sharp needle. "You're still in love with her, aren't you? You can't stand the thought of causing her any hardship? Get a grip, man. She brought that pretty boy, Julian, into your house, into your bed. What is there left for you to protect?" A sharp pain tightened in my chest. The memory of that rainy night returned with an unwelcome clarity. Our son had been running a high fever, and I couldn't get a hold of Clara on the phone. I was driving through the downpour to get to the hospital when I realized halfway there that I had forgotten his medical insurance card, so I had to turn the car around and go back. The house was lit up. Just inside the entrance, a pair of expensive men's dress shoes was next to Clara's high heels. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, and I could hear sounds of labored breathing and muffled laughter coming from inside. "Clara, when are you finally going to get rid of that freeloader? I can't stand having to be so secretive all the time." "What's the rush? I still need him around for a little while longer to take care of Sam. If we get divorced now, he'll just make things difficult and try to fight for his share of the assets. It's too much of a headache." "Please, you're just being sentimental. What could he possibly claim? Sam is yours. You have nothing to worry about. Just offer him some child support and it will be over." "Okay, darling, let's not talk about it anymore. He's nothing like you." I stood there in the cold hallway, holding our sick son in my arms, listening to my wife and her lover discuss me as if I were a piece of furniture, calling me a freeloader and a worthless man. Rainwater dripped from my hair onto my face, soaking through my thin t-shirt and chilling me straight to the bone. In my arms, our son whimpered, "Daddy, I'm cold." At that moment, my heart felt even colder than my drenched clothes. It was completely frozen. I didn't storm into the room. I didn't start yelling or get into a fight. I just calmly turned around, carried my son back out to the car, and drove to the hospital. Once Sam was checked in and resting with an IV drip in his arm, I went to the hospital bathroom and threw up until only bitter bile came out. On that day, the Leo who had built his life around Clara, who had given up his entire career for the sake of our family, ceased to exist. The only thought that remained was that I had to leave, and I had to make sure Clara would pay the highest possible price for what she had done. Walking away with nothing? It was laughable. I opened my eyes and watched the city blur past the car window. My voice was calm and even when I spoke. I'm not saying her money is tainted, Mark. I'm just saying I don't want it. Mark was momentarily silenced, but then his frustration returned, even stronger than before. Tainted money? You should still take it. Money is money. It's what you need right now. It doesn't matter how principled you feel. What about Sam? Are you going to let him go hungry? I turned to face him, managing a faint smile, though my eyes felt harder than they ever had before. Don't worry. Sam isn't going to go hungry. Every single penny of Clara's fortune will eventually find its way back to me, but it will be clean, and it will be on my terms. Mark seemed taken aback by the cold determination in my voice. He just shook his head and mumbled, "You're crazy. You've really lost it." He dropped me off at the small, run-down studio apartment I had rented temporarily, helping me carry in the 2 suitcases that contained all of my belongings. The place was minuscule, with paint peeling from the walls and old, mismatched furniture that gave off a faint, musty odor. Compared to the luxurious villa Clara and I had shared, this place was less than a servant's quarters. "Leo, are you absolutely sure about this? You can come stay with me for a while, you know," Mark urged, his face etched with genuine concern. "No, it's fine. This place is great," I said, setting Sam down on the squeaky old bed. "It's quiet, the rent is low, and it's not far from his preschool. Most importantly, there isn't a single memory of Clara or Julian here." Mark let out a heavy sigh and handed me a bank card. "Here, this is my savings. It's not a lot, but it should help you get by for a bit. I'll ask around about jobs, but you know how it is after being out of the workforce for 7 years. "Thanks," I said, accepting the card without protest. He was a good friend. "I'll find work. Don't worry about me." After Mark left, I sat down in the only chair that felt steady and looked around our new, tiny home. Sam was already asleep, his cheeks flushed. I pulled out my phone and opened a password-protected folder. It wasn't filled with happy memories, but with a carefully curated collection of photographs and screenshots. There were pictures of Clara and Julian looking intimate in various restaurants and hotels, some taken by a private investigator I had hired, and others that Julian had carelessly posted on his private social media accounts, which I had managed to find. There were also several audio recordings. "Clara, could you approve my cousin's project proposal? It's a small investment, just $3 million for startup capital." "Of course. Just have her make sure the proposal looks professional. I'll present it at the board meeting next week." "Sweetheart, I saw a watch that I absolutely love. It's a brand new model and incredibly difficult to find." "Buy it. Just use my secondary credit card." "Clara, I think Leo might suspect something. The way he looked at me today was strange." "Don't worry about him. He's just a house husband. There's nothing he can do. If he ever tries to cause any trouble, I'll just throw him out on the street." Clara's voice in the recording was detached and cold. This was the woman I had loved for 10 years and been married to for 7. To her, I was nothing more than a useless inconvenience that she could dispose of whenever she pleased. I turned off my phone and walked over to the window. In the distance, the city's vibrant neon lights flickered, but their glow didn't reach into my small, dark room. Clara, Julian. The game was just getting started. Walking away with nothing was going to cost them everything. I had the $20,000 Mark had given me, plus a little I had managed to save in secret, which added up to less than $50,000 in total. After paying 3 months' rent, a security deposit, the tuition for Sam's next semester of preschool, and buying some basic household necessities, The money was almost gone. I needed to find a job, and I needed to find one quickly. Reality hit me hard and fast. Being out of the job market for 7 years made my resume practically invisible. The better companies didn't even respond to my applications. The only places willing to consider me were offering intense, low-wage jobs like sorting packages in a warehouse or waiting tables. The hours for those jobs were also impossible to manage while trying to pick up Sam from preschool. After 2 weeks of relentless searching, I finally found a position as a general clerk at a small trading company. The pay was $3,500 a month, with 1 day off a week. My hours were 9 to 6, but there was often overtime. In a city with such a high cost of living, that amount of money was barely enough to support myself and Sam. Every day was a struggle. I would wake up at 6 in the morning to make breakfast for Sam, take him to preschool, and then cram myself onto a crowded subway for an hour-long commute to the office. The work of a clerk was tedious and never-ending, making copies, running errands, ordering lunch for the office, and sorting through endless stacks of paperwork. The office computer was painfully slow, and my supervisor seemed to find fault with everything I did. Most of my coworkers were young women who regarded me, an older man with a child starting over, with a mixture of pity and subtle judgment. After my workday was over, I would fight my way back onto the subway to pick up Sam, and we would usually get home around 8 in the evening. Then I would rush to cook dinner, spend a little time playing with him, and get him to bed. Only then could I open my laptop and search for freelance work online. I managed to find some translation jobs that paid by the word, and I often worked on them until well past midnight. Life felt incredibly difficult. Sometimes I would see Clara featured in the business section of the news. Her company had just secured another massive project, and its valuation was climbing by billions. She always looked so poised and powerful. I would also see Julian's social media posts, where he was essentially broadcasting his new, lavish lifestyle to the world, showing off expensive sports cars, designer watches, and trips to exclusive resorts. His captions were always things like, "So grateful for the light of my life. I found the best version of myself with you, Clara." Their followers would leave comments about how they were a perfect match and how fortunate Clara was. It was nauseating. One weekend, I took Sam to an amusement park, and I saw them there, Clara and Julian. Sam's sharp eyes spotted her immediately, and he pointed excitedly. "Daddy, look, it's Mommy!" He pulled his hand from mine and ran towards them like a happy little bird. When Clara saw us, her expression immediately soured, her brow furrowed with unmistakable annoyance and contempt. She stopped Sam, who was running towards her with a huge smile, with an awkwardness usually reserved for the child of a distant relative. Julian stood beside her, dressed in the latest designer streetwear with a watch on his wrist that was worth more than my annual salary. He looked down at me, a victorious and pitying smirk on his face. "Leo, brought Sam out for some fun?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "This place is more your speed, very down to earth." He wrapped his arm around Clara's waist. "Clara, we should go. Our reservation is soon. It's a 3-star Michelin restaurant. It was almost impossible to get a table." Clara nodded, then bent down and pulled a few $100 bills from her wallet. She pushed them into Sam's hand, her tone completely devoid of warmth. "Here, go have some fun." Then, without so much as a glance in my direction, she turned and walked away with Julian. Holding the money, Sam's smile slowly faded. His large eyes filled with tears as he watched his mother and the well-dressed man walk away, looking utterly confused and heartbroken. He was too young to understand why his mommy didn't want to be with him and Daddy anymore. In that moment, I felt a pain in my chest, like a dull knife twisting slowly. It wasn't for Clara's cruelty, but for my son's broken heart. I knelt and pulled Sam into a tight hug, fighting back my own tears. "It's okay, Sam. Mommy has to work. Daddy will play with you. I'll even buy you that giant transformer you wanted, okay? Sam buried his face into my shoulder, his small body shaking with quiet sobs. He mumbled, "Okay, I just want Daddy." As I watched Clara and Julian disappear into the crowd, the last bit of warmth in my heart for her was extinguished. It was replaced by a cold, burning hatred. Clara, Julian. The higher you climb, the harder you will fall. Time passed slowly as I settled into my monotonous routine, pushing through each day with sheer determination. At the office, I was Frank, the quiet and hard-working clerk who did whatever was asked of him. At night, I was a single father, staying up late to finish my translation projects. On the weekends, I would take Sam to free public parks and libraries. Life was hard, but our small apartment gradually started to feel more like a home. I bought some cheap fabric to make curtains and tablecloths and planted some vines in old plastic bottles. Sam was becoming more sensible and asked about his mother less and less. There was a small breakthrough at my job. An older salesman at the company retired, and my boss, who had noticed that I was reliable and had a decent command of English, asked me to try handling some of our smaller client accounts. Although I only received a token raise of $500, it was a step closer to the core operations of the business, and I could see more opportunities. I dedicated myself completely to learning, absorbing information about our products, processes, pricing strategies, and negotiation tactics like a dry sponge. I would stay late to organize files when my coworkers had already gone home. On weekends, while others were relaxing, I was at home studying industry analyses and reports on our competitors. Then, an opportunity finally presented itself. The company had been trying for months to land a client from Northern Europe, but the negotiations had stalled. The client had high standards and was demanding a very low price. The sales manager was incredibly stressed. I spent days researching all the publicly available information on this potential client, as well as their past purchasing history. I discovered that they had a strong corporate commitment to sustainability and environmental protection, which happened to align perfectly with a new, eco-friendly product our company had recently developed. All of the previous sales proposals had focused solely on our competitive pricing and had completely overlooked this key aspect. I stayed up for 2 consecutive nights and put together a comprehensive new proposal. Instead of focusing on price reductions, I used data to demonstrate how our new product perfectly matched their corporate sustainability objectives. I argued that it would not only save them money in the long run, but also enhance their brand's image. With a great deal of nervousness, I presented the proposal to my manager. He read it carefully and then just looked at me for a long time with a complicated expression. "Leo, I had no idea you were capable of this." In the end, the company decided to adopt my proposed strategy. After a few more rounds of negotiation, we successfully landed the difficult client. Even though I was only involved in the execution and the primary credit went to the manager and the business director, my manager started to see me in a new light. He officially transferred me from my clerk position to the business department, giving me the title of business assistant and raising my salary to $5,000 a month. More importantly, this new role gave me access to the company's internal networks and a wider range of resources. At a small industry networking event, I ran into a familiar face. It was Sophie. She had been a senior of mine in university and was the captain of the debate team. She had always been a standout student, coming from a well-off family and possessing incredible talent. After graduation, she had gone abroad to continue her studies, and I had heard that she had become very successful. She hadn't changed much. She was just more polished and professional. She was wearing a sharp, dark business suit and still commanded attention in a crowded room. She recognized me first, a look of surprise on her face. "Leo, is that really you?" I felt a little self-conscious. The discounted suit I had bought specifically for this event suddenly felt cheap and ill-fitting next to her. "Sophie, it's been a long time." She looked me over, her expression warm and friendly, with no trace of judgment. "I heard you got married after college. How have you been?" I tried to sound casual as I smiled faintly. "Divorced. I'm starting over with my son." Her eyes showed a flash of understanding, and maybe a hint of sympathy. She didn't press for more details, just handed me her business card. "I've started my own small investment firm. If you ever need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're old classmates, after all." I took the high-quality card. It read, "Q Capital, Sophie." A small idea began to form in my mind. I didn't call Sophie right away. I knew that I didn't have any real value to offer her yet. I needed to continue building myself up and wait for the right opportunity. The days passed in a blur of work. I slowly but surely established myself at the company, getting promoted from assistant to a junior account executive, with my salary increasing to over $7,000 a month. With the additional income from my freelance translation work, money was still tight, but I no longer had to worry about being able to afford Sam's formula or his tuition. I moved us out of the studio and into a slightly larger two-bedroom apartment with a small balcony. Sam was thrilled to have his own room. But I continued to see news about Clara and Julian. In the financial world, Clara's company was thriving, its value growing at an incredible rate. In the world of tabloids and social media, Julian was becoming well known as the handsome man behind the successful businesswoman, constantly showing off his luxurious lifestyle and Clara's affection for him. Their success only made the knot of determination in my gut tighten. I knew that Julian's greed, combined with Clara's growing arrogance, would be the perfect recipe for their downfall. My long-term investment was finally beginning to pay off. The first problem arose from a raw materials procurement project that was being managed by Julian's cousin, whom Clara had appointed as the deputy manager of the purchasing department. The materials they procured were of poor quality and had been purchased at an inflated price, which led to serious quality control issues with one of the company's product lines. Customers demanded refunds, and the company suffered a major financial loss. Clara was furious. A thorough internal investigation revealed that Julian's cousin had been embezzling funds. Julian pleaded with Clara on his cousin's behalf, insisting that he had no knowledge of it. He waited outside her office for an entire afternoon, explaining that his cousin was just young and naive, and had been taken advantage of. In the end, out of her feelings for Julian, Clara decided not to involve the police. She fired his cousin and managed to recover some of the lost funds, but the incident planted a seed of doubt in the minds of the company's executives and shareholders, damaging Julian's image as a helpful partner. This was just the beginning. The main event happened a month later. Clara's company was in the process of bidding for a large government-led infrastructure project. Winning this contract was critical. It would elevate the company to a whole new level of scale and influence. Clara was confident they would win and had invested a significant amount of resources into the bid. However, just days before the final decision, a rival company released a detailed technical proposal and pricing analysis that was suspiciously similar to Clara's. This analysis specifically targeted the weaknesses and cost vulnerabilities of her company's proposal. The company's most sensitive trade secrets had been leaked. Their bid failed miserably. The preliminary investment was a total loss, the company's reputation was severely damaged, and its stock price plummeted. Clara was enraged and immediately launched an investigation to find the mole. After several days of digging, all the evidence seemed to subtly point toward Julian. An anonymous source reported having seen Julian meeting frequently with a female director from the rival company during the bidding period. Others provided grainy security camera footage that showed Julian using an old employee's access card to enter the company's secure archives late at night. Julian was completely stunned. He rushed to Clara's office, crying and swearing that he was innocent and that he had been framed. "Clara, you have to believe me. Why would I ever betray you? Everything I have is because of you. It doesn't make any sense." Clara's face was pale, and her eyes were colder and more suspicious than he had ever seen them. "Then how do you explain the security footage? And your meetings with Director Wang?" I was trying to get some inside information for you, and the access card. I just found it on the floor and was curious." Julian's excuses were weak and unconvincing. Just then, Clara's assistant entered the office with a grim expression and handed her a file. "Ma'am, the IT department was able to recover some deleted emails from Mr. Julian's private account. You should see this." Clara's eyes widened as she read the contents of the file. It was an email from Julian to an anonymous overseas account, sent just days before the bidding deadline. The attachment had been deleted, but the body of the email read, "Data has been sent. Please deposit the remaining balance into the following account." It was followed by an overseas bank account number. A preliminary trace of that account linked it to a shell corporation that was secretly connected to Julian's mother's family. The evidence was irrefutable. The sharp sound of a slap echoed through the office as Clara's hand struck Julian's face. She was shaking with rage, her eyes red. She pointed a trembling finger toward the door, her voice barely a whisper. "Get out. Get out of my office right now. If I ever see you again, I will make sure you spend the rest of your life in prison." Stunned, Julian clutched his cheek, still trying to plead his case, but two security guards, alerted by the commotion, entered the office and dragged him out. His desperate cries faded down the hallway. Clara collapsed into her chair, her face in her hands. Her company's secrets had been stolen, a crucial project had been lost, the stock price was in freefall. The shareholders were blaming her, and the banks were demanding their money back. To make matters worse, the man she had trusted completely had just stabbed her in the back. She was being attacked from all sides, and her company was on the verge of collapse. The crisis escalated quickly. The failed bid was just the beginning. Soon, the tax authorities launched a surprise audit. Newspapers published a story about a safety violation at one of her company's real estate developments, which resulted in a government order to halt construction. The company's access to credit suddenly dried up. Shareholders panicked and started selling their stock, causing the price to fall even further. The banks, sensing the increased risk, not only refused to extend more credit, but also started demanding early repayment of existing loans. Everyone who had once supported her was now abandoning the sinking ship. Clara was completely overwhelmed, running around desperately trying to secure new funding to stop the bleeding. But at this critical moment, her company's credit rating was downgraded, and her former business partners wanted nothing to do with her. The banks began the process of seizing her mansions and luxury cars. The once mighty Clara was now, just a few months later, facing bankruptcy. And through it all, like a patient spider, I quietly watched from the shadows as my web grew tighter. It was at this point that Sophie called me. "Leo," she said, her voice calm and steady over the phone. "Clara's company won't survive past the end of this month. That's the final deadline the bank has given her. She's selling off all of her remaining properties and stocks at a steep discount to make one last attempt to save it." "I see," I replied, my heart beating at a steady rhythm. "Are you ready?" Sophie asked. I looked at my computer screen at the long string of numbers in a secret offshore account I had established. It was the money I had been painstakingly siphoning and accumulating for the past 3 years, moving it like an ant carrying grains of sand through legitimate-looking channels. The source? It had all come from Clara's own vast fortune, small amounts that she never noticed were missing before I left. There were the high-value retirement insurance policies and trust funds that had been purchased during our marriage, which I later liquidated or used as collateral through complex financial maneuvers. There were the small investment properties that Clara had gifted me early in our relationship, which she had long since forgotten about, that I mortgaged just before the real estate market boomed to fund a few high-risk but high-reward ventures. Then there was the supplementary credit card she had given me, which she had told me to use as I pleased. After Julian came along, I rarely used it, but she had forgotten to cancel it and never bothered to check the statements. For years, this card had seen several large monthly payments to shell companies I controlled, disguised as fees for high-end home consulting and private nutrition planning. All of this money was eventually funneled into my secret account. In addition, in its early days, Clara's company had paid a portion of its profits to overseas affiliate companies as consulting fees to avoid taxes. I had, through a series of quiet transactions, gained control of one of these shell companies, and that money also became part of my reserves. All of these transactions were small and spread out, like tiny streams flowing into a vast ocean of wealth. Combined with the generous image I had cultivated by waiving my right to any assets during the divorce, and my subsequent portrayal as a struggling single father, no one would ever suspect that the ex-husband who had left with nothing was the one who held the key to her entire downfall. "I'm ready," I said calmly to Sophie. "Good," she replied decisively. "I will have Q Capital move in to purchase her core assets and stocks at a low price. You just follow through with the rest of the plan on your end." "Thank you, Sophie." "Don't thank me, Leo. This is something you've earned. It was your strategy from the beginning. I'm just helping to execute it." Sophie paused for a moment, her voice softening. "How is Sam?" "He's doing great. Thanks for asking." I hung up the phone and walked to the window. A light rain was beginning to fall outside. Over 3 years of patience and countless sleepless nights were about to come to fruition. "Clara, your day of reckoning has arrived." The news of Clara's company filing for bankruptcy was the top story on all the financial news outlets. The once celebrated business tycoon had suffered a dramatic and public fall from grace. Her mansions, luxury cars, and expensive jewelry were all seized by the banks to be auctioned off. As the old saying goes, when the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. Julian had vanished completely after the scandal broke. The rumor was that he had taken the last of the cash and jewelry from Clara's personal safe and fled the country. No one knew where he went. Before he left, he reportedly sent one last message to Clara, saying, "I'm sorry, but I really need this money to start over. Please forget about me." Clara had lost everything and was left with an insurmountable amount of debt. She was forced to rent a small, damp apartment in a rundown part of the city and was surviving by working odd jobs. The once confident and impeccably dressed woman now looked tired and worn, wearing cheap faded t-shirts that made her blend in with the crowd. As for me, thanks to Sophie's expert maneuvering, I was able to acquire all of the core assets of Clara's company, the technology patents, the brand, and the key real estate holdings, at an incredibly low price. Q Capital was hailed as the big winner in the deal, and Sophie's reputation in the investment world skyrocketed. But, of course, the real winner was me. A new empire, my empire, was built from the ruins of Clara's. I moved out of the 2-bedroom apartment and took Sam to live in a top-floor flat in the heart of the city. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the glittering skyline. Sam had his own room just for his Lego collection and a dedicated nanny to look after him. I became a partner at Q Capital, and Sophie treated me with the respect and authority I had earned. My life had changed completely. One rainy afternoon, the doorbell rang. The nanny answered it, and I heard her surprised voice ask, "Who are you looking for?" I was sitting on the living room floor, building a castle out of blocks with Sam, and I looked up at the sound. Standing in the doorway was Clara. She had lost a significant amount of weight. Her cheeks were hollow, and her once perfectly styled hair was now messy and damp, clinging to her shoulders. Her cheap jacket was soaked from the rain and splattered with mud. In her hand, she held a plastic bag containing a few wrinkled apples. She stared at the spacious, brightly lit, and elegantly furnished living room, then at me, dressed in soft, comfortable clothes, looking healthy and content. A complex mix of emotions played across her face: shock, confusion, disbelief, and an overwhelming wave of regret and pain. "Leo," she said, her voice hoarse and raspy. At the sight of her, Sam instinctively moved closer to me, whispering, "Mom?" His voice was uncertain, filled with a child's sense of unfamiliarity and a hint of fear. Clara's gaze shifted to our son, her lips trembling and her eyes immediately turning red. "Sam," she started to say, taking a step forward. I stood up, gently shielding Sam behind me, and looked at her, my expression unreadable. "What do you want?" My indifferent tone seemed to freeze her in place. She stood awkwardly in the entryway, rainwater dripping from her clothes onto the polished floor, creating dark stains that stood out against the light-colored wood. She swallowed hard, and then humbly held out the plastic bag. I was passing by a fruit stand. The apples looked nice. I bought some for Sam." Her voice was weak and dry. The nanny stood off to the side, her eyes filled with a mixture of suspicion and a barely concealed disdain. I didn't take the bag. I just said flatly, "Sam only eats organic fruit now. His meals are prepared by a nutritionist. You should keep those for yourself." Clara's hand froze in mid-air, the plastic bag making a soft, crinkling sound. The color drained from her face, leaving it a pasty white. She slowly lowered her hand, the bag of apples hanging limply at her side. She looked at me with the desperate eyes of a dying fish. "Leo, I know that I failed you and Sam," she said, her voice choking with emotion. "I was terrible. I was a fool. I wasn't even human. But that's all in the past." "It's not over, Leo. I can't move on." Clara suddenly became agitated, taking another step forward and tracking more mud and water onto the floor. "I regret it every single day. I regret letting myself be fooled by Julian. I regret the way I treated you. I regret losing Sam. Leo, I was wrong. I was so wrong. I'm begging you, please give me another chance. Let's start over, I swear. I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you and Sam." Tears streamed down her face, mixing with the rain, her expression one of painful humility as she desperately pleaded her case. If I had seen her like this 3 years ago, I might have felt my heart soften. I might have felt some pain. But now, all I felt was a cold, quiet calm. "Start over?" I repeated softly, a faint, mocking smile touching my lips. "Clara, do you honestly believe that's possible?" I looked directly at her, my words clear and deliberate. "Have you forgotten? When we got divorced, you told me yourself that I was just a stay-at-home husband who couldn't make waves, and that I should just leave. And you, when you were with Julian, you complained about the down-to-earth places I took Sam, insisting that you only wanted to go to Michelin-starred restaurants. When Sam was crying for his mother, where were you? You were buying Julian an expensive watch. You were whispering to him that I wasn't worthy of sharing your money." My question seemed to pin her in place. Her face was as white as a sheet, and she swayed slightly on her feet. "Clara," I interrupted again, my voice low but firm. "What's done is done. You can't put a broken mirror back together. Everything between us ended the moment you chose to betray me and our son." I gestured toward the door. "This is my home, and Sam's home. You are not welcome here. Please leave." The light in Clara's eyes flickered and died. She was completely engulfed in despair. She stared at me as if she were seeing the man standing before her for the very first time. The husband who had once been completely dependent on her, who had built his entire world around her, had transformed into someone she didn't recognize at all. Her lips moved, and she finally asked the question that had clearly been tormenting her, driving her to the edge of madness. "Did you know? When you walked away with nothing? Was that part of a plan? About Julian? About the company? Did you—" She couldn't finish the sentence, but the fear and the desperate need for an answer were plain to see in her eyes. I didn't deny it, but I didn't confirm it either. I just lifted my chin slightly, a small, cold smile on my face, a smile I had perfected in the business world. Clara, business is like a battlefield. All is fair in love and war. You were the one who taught me that. You taught me that you should never trust your fate to someone else's conscience. I paused, my tone becoming completely indifferent. As for the rest of it, does it really matter anymore? What matters is that everything you once had now legally belongs to me and Sam. Everything you were once so proud of. Clara looked as if she had been struck by lightning. She staggered backward, leaning against the cold doorframe for support. Her eyes were filled with a mixture of horror, despair, and a chilling fear. Her last shred of hope had been utterly destroyed. She had lost, completely and totally. Not to a business rival, not to Julian's betrayal, but to the ex-husband she had never truly seen, the one she thought she could control and discard like an old toy. She had lost so thoroughly that there was no possibility of a comeback. She turned, almost in a trance, and walked back out into the rain like a hollowed-out shell, stumbling with each step. Her shoulders were hunched in utter defeat. I closed the door, shutting out the cold and the damp. I turned around and picked up Sam. "Dad, what happened to Mom?" he asked in a small voice. "Your mom," I said, kissing his soft cheek, my voice gentle but firm. "Took a wrong turn, and now she can't find her way back. What about us?" "Us?" I held Sam close and walked over to the large floor-to-ceiling window. I looked out at the city, which had been washed clean by the rain and was now shining brightly under the afternoon sun. The sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over everything. Our path is just beginning. The doorbell rang again. The nanny answered it, and I heard her say respectfully, "Miss Sophie, you're here." Sophie walked in, wearing a stylish dark gray trench coat. She was holding a fancy cake box in her hand. A gentle smile was on her face, and her eyes came to rest on me and Sam. "See, I didn't forget my promise to bring Sam his strawberry cake," she said, waving the box at him. Sam immediately wiggled out of my arms and ran over to her, cheering, "Sophie! Sophie!" Sophie bent down and scooped him up into her arms with a warm smile. She carried him over to the window and stood beside me, looking out at the magnificent cityscape. "Is everything taken care of?" she asked softly, a quiet concern in her voice. "Yes," I nodded. "She won't be back." Sophie was silent for a moment, her gaze fixed on the street below where Clara had disappeared into the flow of traffic. "Do you still hate her?" she asked. I let out a long breath, watching the bright sun. "I used to hate her more than anything, but now—" I paused, feeling Sam's warm little body leaning against me, feeling Sophie's steady presence beside me, and looking around at our clean, hopeful new home. Now, I realize that hating her for any longer would be a waste of time. Sophie turned to look at me, a soft light in her eyes. "Leo, have you thought about—" she began, her voice soft, with an almost imperceptible hint of nervousness and hope. "Giving Sam a complete family. And giving yourself a fresh start?" Sam, still in Sophie's arms, looked back and forth between us with curious eyes. I was a little taken aback. A new beginning? I looked into Sophie's sincere eyes, then down at Sam's small face, which was filled with so much trust. Then, I looked past them, out the window again. The city was thriving in the sunlight. The past felt like a long, cold, and wet nightmare. But now, the morning had finally come. I turned back to meet Sophie's hopeful gaze and slowly broke into a smile, a clear and bright smile that was free from all the burdens of the past. "Sophie," I said, extending my hand and gently taking Sam's little hand in mine as well, as if I were grasping a hopeful and significant future. Shall we walk this new path together?